What's up, everybody? Paul here from the Hoops Crew, and it's grand final week. The Cats are playing, which is awesome news. But of course, just like every grand final, there's always a sad tale of someone missing out that really doesn't deserve to. And this time, it was Max Holmes back in 2022. We've seen David Johnson and others miss in really sad circumstances for the Cats over the years. But in 2025, it's our vice captain, Tom Stewart, is out for the AFL Grand Final. As you all know, from the reporting and from having watched the game on the weekend against the Hawks, a Mabior Chol tackle, fall in the back. It's got him 3 weeks. We'll talk about that along the way too. But a Mabior Chol act has left Tom Stewart out for the AFL Grand Final in 2025. It's really sad circumstance. I'm sure Richmond fans, well, I've seen them online. Richmond fans don't care, but you're also pieces of shit. So let's move past all of that and just talk about the pre-finals bye versus the pre-grand final bye. These things are being discussed and considered at the moment. How Geelong covers for Tom Stewart, we're speculating a little bit about that. We'll go through a whole range of different elements of this story. But first, let's take a word from our sponsor.
The Hoops Crew Media Network is proudly sponsored by Cyril Cook Florist. Visit them at shop 1211 Leather Street in Breakwater. Phone them on 035 222 2244 or visit their website at www.cyrilcookflorist.com.au and use the offer code GOCATS in the voucher field at checkout to get 20% off your next online purchase.
Thank you, Cyril Cook Florist, as always, for your ongoing support of the Hoops Crew and all we get up to. Now, let's get into the news and let's break down what we know so far and then pick through this one a little bit further. Thank you, Fox Footy, for providing the article here where it leads off by talking about Chris Scott describing Tom Stewart's unavailability for next week's grand final as a shattering situation after the champion defender entered concussion protocols on Friday night during the Cats' prelim final win over the Hawks. And honestly, I didn't pick it for a while. I thought wrist, I thought shoulder, all numbers of things. That's what he went to grab in the first place. But then apparently, as he was heading off the ground, he started to get really wobbly. They tested, they ruled him out. His grand final chances were over. Stewart was subbed out in the first quarter after having had his head forcibly driven into the turf while being tackled by Hawks forward Mabior Chol. The incident has already sparked fierce debate about the placement of the late season bye, which currently occurs after the final round rather than prior to the grand final, given the fact that an affected player must remain in the protocols for 12 days and be unavailable to play during that period. Chris Scott said in the press conference after the fact, he said, "I'm very pro a week off before the grand final if we can sneak that in this year," which, good sense of humor about the whole thing because it's otherwise a pretty sad and shitty situation. Now, of course, we've got other players, and I don't want to be too Geelong biased in this scenario, but we do have other players that are racing the clock, trying to make it. Now, technically, the situation for Lachie Neale would be, he did it in the first week of finals. If we had the pre-grand final, he would even have more time. So it would work out well for Lachie Neale as well. He'd have an extra week up his sleeve. And Jared Berry, having done his shoulder, would have an extra week. So there's potential pros for Brisbane here. It would also allow Tom Stewart to be available. I think there's a lot of merit in the pre-grand final bye going on, and that's your opportunity to lean in with all of the state league grand finals, go harder with the women's. You've got the competition, you've got the Brownlow, you could do all strands, you've got Rising Stars, you've got all of these things get bundled into that week, and really it becomes like a 2 week, and obviously the phrase festival of footy has been kind of trotted around a little bit for gather round, but you can really have this big theatrical build-up to the AFL Grand Final, 2 weeks from prelim final, the end of the prelim finals. You've got all of these events from all Australian squads being revealed to the actual team, to Rising Star, to, of course, then the weekend, which would normally be the grand final, that gap between prelim and the grand final, where you can have all of the state league grand finals. So get everyone out there to Icon Park like we just had this weekend for the VFL, or get over to the Sandful, the Waffle, absorb all of those. Got your local league competitions. You can go to the women's game and not have to worry about any potential clashes. It is so much better. Then you have the Brownlow. Then you can continue down this exciting road that leads all the way to the grand final. You've just got to set the stepping stones for this whole thing. We see it happen in international sport where there's a big gap, for example, before the Super Bowl. This thing works. If you go down this path, it absolutely works. It's just whether the AFL wants to pursue it or not, and whether there's enough noise about it. Now, the reports are that old Swanee, who's now taken over the reins in the AFL, is pretty keen to scrap, to, I guess, put an end to situations like this one, because Tom Stewart may well be cleared and good to, technically good to go as of this coming weekend, but because of the length of the protocol, which is based on science, I'm sure. But based on that, he's unable to come back, despite the fact he's quite likely, hopefully, fingers crossed, going to be okay. And so, while I don't begrudge anyone for doing the 12 days, if that's what science and doctors are determining is the appropriate amount of time to be able to assess, I'm fine with all of that. But if you just shuffle your fixture around a little bit, it gives Tom Stewart, it gives Lachie Neale, it gives Berry all of the time they need to get themselves ready for a grand final. And it allows both teams to go in the best possible shape they can. Doesn't rule out every situation. You're not going to get someone coming back from an ACL, but you can certainly address a few other things. Eric Hipwood's not coming back, but there's plenty of others that can. Those short-termers. The Stewart one's a bit hard to take at the moment. Scott said the AFL's introduction of the pre-finals by 9 years ago was based on flawed rationale, namely to prevent finals-bound teams from resting scores of key players in the last round, like Fremantle and North did in 2013 and 2015, respectively. And it did look ugly, but the consequences now are kind of shit. I understand it's not optimal for the AFL to have masses of players rested in inconsequential games in the last home and away round of the year, but I just didn't think that was a good enough reason, Scott said. Oh, I'm sorry. I feel that the clubs should have autonomy over this stuff, and it was in a period of time too where the AFL just couldn't find another space for a bye during the year, and they found one overnight. And then we start talking a little bit about the influence of danger over the course of the game. So let's hone back in on Tom Stewart and what has to happen from here. Of course, we've just had the conversation about the pre-finals bye versus the pre-grand final bye and how that could all potentially look in the future. But what I really want to hone in on now is this is the situation. It is what it is. We can't change anything right now. Maybe there'll be changes next year. This certainly feels like one of the big catalysts. It took a rock star player to get knocked out of a grand final for suddenly people to start really getting up in arms. The Lachie Neale one is different, but just don't lose sight of the fact if they started a week earlier and then they've got the bye to come, if he did it in the qualifying just like he did anyway, he would have had the extra week. So there's Lachie Neale that's more likely to be back on the table. His chances of playing are firming at the moment, but there's a lot to this. If we want to hone in, though, on the incident itself really, really quickly, we can, I think maybe O'Chol's been offered 3 weeks. This was absolutely one of those 0 or 3 or 4 sort of week scenarios. And I'm adamant that if Hawthorn played the grand final, and this is me putting my tinfoil hat on, but if Hawthorn actually got through us in the prelim final and were going to play in the grand final, maybe O'Chol would have been on the 0 side of the fence. I'm absolutely sure of it. Just like Dane Zorko got away with nothing for attempted eye gouging. It's just a shame. It's just lucky for him, that he can't reach Mason Cox all the way up there. So now let's talk about the consequences for Geelong when it comes to this grand final and what that could potentially look like. I've been really bullish in the last 24, 48, 72 hours since Tom Stewart went down and the Cats got the win, that with him coming out, I think Reece Stanley is the obvious one. And then this gives you the opportunity to start getting a bit creative and a bit flexible with your forward line. Brisbane's playing a 2 tall forward line in Ty Gallop and old mate Morris. But then, how we use Mark Blitzarves can be really important here. He's done a fantastic job as the ruck. Now, Brisbane, as opposed to when we played them a couple of weeks ago, now have a 2 ruck setup going. Oscar McInerney and Darcy Fort are in, so maybe Geelong also needs to implement its own 2 ruck policy, but we could also have the 2 rucks in the middle at the time. Reece Stanley to take the ruck, Mark Blitzarves to shark it, Mark Blitzarves to play in defence, Mark Blitzarves to play on the wing. There are so many, Mark Blitzarves to be our 3rd tall again. There's so many different ways we can use this guy, but I'm really curious as to how this happens. I think Reece Stanley is the one they're going to bring in, just simply because I know it's almost the most logical sort of option. Bring in your healthy ruckman who you've been playing for as often as you can, whenever you can. But the other half of it is that looking at Brisbane's lineup, and I've been beating this drum about this particular individual for years now, but looking at Brisbane's lineup, and I think about Charlie Cameron. I think about Zach Bailey. I think about Cam Rayner. They've got some good small to mid-sized forwards. And Mark O'Connor did a great job on what's his name last time. You've then got Charlie and Zach Bailey. And Charlie in particular is the one that's of concern to me because he is the one that's playing that very traditional small forward. I want to see Jed Buse come into the team. Take Charlie out of the game. Let Lawson Humphreys go deal with a Bailey or someone like that. There's also Kai Lohman to factor in as well. Shuffle these pieces around, get your defense as strong and structured as you possibly can. Let Mark Blitzarves do his thing in the ruck. He's got the tank to run with a 2-ruck setup all day. It's fine. I'm not worried about him in that capacity. And we've got the tools between Jack Henry, Sam De Koning, and Connor O'Sullivan to deal with Morris, Gallup, and then one of Fort and McInerney popping into the forward line as well. We've got the flexibility there. So there's a bit of me that says, let's go to Jed Buse. Let's go an experienced small defender who's going to lock down one of their smalls. And Mark Blitzarves can do the job on the ruckman while Sam De Koning can peel off and deal with the other floating ruckman. There's a lot of options here. And it's going to be really fascinating to see how this one plays out ahead of the grand final. So anyway, the mess that comes with shock and saddening omission before a grand final. Cats fans, Brisbane fans, neutrals, let me know what you think of this conversation around the pre-finals versus pre-grand final by the Tom Stewart incident, the Mabiel Chol suspension. I want to hear all of your, and obviously the player that will come in for Tom Stewart. I'm keen to hear all of your thoughts. Drop them in the comment section below. And if you like this video, well, drop a like on it. Subscribe to the Hoops Crew on YouTube and check out all of the content from myself, Ben, and the chaps. There's heaps of it there. So please go out and enjoy it. You'll find us on Patreon as well, patreon.com/thehoopscrew, where there's early access, extended and exclusive content there for you to enjoy. It costs $5 a month to get access to it, and there's a 7-day free trial to see if it's for you before you commit. But then once you do, all of that content is delivered directly to your email inbox. You'll find me at socials, Paul James Games on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Instagram. The Hoops Crew will find at the Hoops Crew. And until next time, remain Geelong strong, everyone. It's a big week. Lots to dissect around this matchup, and I'm very keen to see what Geelong's match committee will come up with. Thank you all for watching. Remain Geelong strong, and I'll see you later.